All right, folks, just one housekeeping item here. I went ahead and posted a link in the chat for the PDR credits, so you will need to click on that link. It'll just ask you for a few things, your email, PGID number, and first and last name. So please complete that Google form in order to get your PDR credit. Really excited to have Brian, but first I'm going to throw it over to our chapter director in the Triangle chapter, Rob Paluski, who's really been on organizing this and a lot of our education. So I want to say thank you, Rob, for your involvement, and just throw it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ben, and we appreciate all your support, Ben, for making our chapter and events so successful. But good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our, I apologize for the phone ringing there, our rules session today, and it's my honor to introduce Brian Fahey, who's manager of rules and competition with LPGA, and also a member of the PGA Rules Committee for the past 8 years, and prior experience at Pinehurst as a manager of the 2017 Four-Ball Championship and 2019 U.S. Amateur Championship, and achieved his expert rules status in 2019. And Brian, thank you so much for being here today. Take it away.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Hope everybody can hear me okay. And hopefully this technology will work. I can get the screen shared here to show the presentation. So we'll see if this starts working here. We'll go this way, I guess. All right, can everybody see my screen here as I'm messing around? Everybody see my screen all right?
Yeah, we got you, Brian.
Okay, good. All right, everybody can hear me okay for the most part?
Yes, sir.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Just need one yes. Great, thank you. Well, again, thank you guys for taking the time out of your middle of your St. Patrick's Day here to talk about the rules of golf. I know it's probably not the most exciting topic for some people, but for the most part, obviously, as golf professionals, PGA professionals, we're expected to have knowledge in all assets of the game. And I think, obviously, for me, this is one I'm passionate about and one I'm involved in quite a bit, obviously. So happy to share this information with you. Obviously, in 2023, USGA, every 4 years, they come out with changes to the rules. So these are the kind of the major changes, if you will, kind of hitting the highlights here. We got about 45 minutes. So hopefully we can get everything covered and hopefully answer some of your questions as well. And also pause here and there again to help answer any questions that you may have, and we can get through this together.
You too.
All right, so kind of a quick overview. Those are kind of the general areas of the topics we'll be talking about: penalty, application changes, changes to the equipment rules. There's 2 scorecard changes we'll talk about that deal most with stroke play. Some modifications to playing the ball, advice and help. I know this does say the meaning of agree, but we're actually going to skip that for time purposes, but can touch on it if we happen to cruise through a few things. That the meaning of agree certainly comes into form of match play more than anything. And then rules 21 to 25, again, touch on briefly. Really, rule 25 is what I'm going to touch on briefly. And really just kind of making note of it, really. But on the screen there, you also see, obviously, the 2 different rule books. The book on the right-hand side of the screen there is the official guide to the rules of golf. Certainly, if you're at your home club, certainly encourage you to have this book if you don't have it. Obviously, very useful, very helpful. It's got all the clarifications and interpretations in there. Got all the model local rules and a lot more details of the rules of golf. So certainly recommend that. Obviously, hopefully many of you probably have the USGA Rules of Golf app. Something I use quite a bit. You can just type in the words and it finds it for you. So it makes it so much easier, especially for me out on the golf course. I need to find something real quick. I can type in the few keywords and then boom, I get all the topics I'm looking for. Probably a lot quicker than actually finding it in the book. So a couple of resources for you there as well. I will mention the USGA website obviously is always great content, and they've got a summarization of all the changes. So if this is something that you're interested in or want to know more about the details or more changes or other changes, I definitely recommend going to the USGA website to get the full list and explanation of all the rules here. So again, we're going to kind of touch on some things very, very lightly here. All right, so moving on. I guess before we go too much further, too, I just want to mention throughout the presentation, we'll be talking quite a bit about model local rules. And again, I'll just touch on that real briefly. Hopefully many of you understand and know what model local rules are. But obviously in the game of golf, every golf course is different. Every part of the country is a little different. So the rules, even though we all play by the same set of rules, there needs to be some settings in the rules is the best way to look at it that you can turn on and off that allow you to modify your competition or modify the rules that fit for your golf course. So we'll be talking about model local rules throughout the presentation. So again, model local rules are settings or switches. Obviously, we can all turn on and off that allow us to better conduct our competition, whether it's, model local rules for equipment and equipment that's going to be allowed or not allowed, whether it's model local rules for relief from certain items or things you may have in your golf course. And again, some of those things might be temporary. So you might have it, on a rule sheet, for one event, for a certain part of the year at your golf club. And then another year, maybe it's not in play. But obviously there's many model local rules. And certainly if you're at your club, your home club, and you're hosting events, certainly encourage you to go through those model local rules just to see what settings are available and see what options you do have. Obviously I think we all, a lot of our members, if you're at your club, members come up and say, oh, we're gonna invoke the root rule today. Well, the root rule is not really a rule of golf, so therefore you can't just willy-nilly make up rules as you go. But the model local rules do allow and let you know what rules you can put in place or don't have to have in place. Obviously, there is a model local rule that does allow for relief from roots, but that's only in fairways. So again, just kind of a quick example of what model local rules are and what they mean. Obviously, if you're playing in a tournament, if you're more of a player, maybe not so much hosting events, but if you're a player, again, good to know what the different model local rules are. And, when you're playing in your tournament, always good to look at your rule sheet to see what model local rules are in play for that event. All right, so again, kind of continuing forward, we'll start with the penalty application changes. Again, there's two different changes here, both fairly significant. Again, so we're talking about most of the major ones here anyways, but so we'll get right into that. Real good change here. Rule 13C4 talks about applying penalties to multiple breaches of the rules, right? So even for me, who deals with the rules quite a bit, anytime there were multiple breaches, I would always have to go back to the book, read the sentence, read the paragraphs, and kind of, piece together what happened and try and make it work. So in 2019, the rules of golf used to use the terms related and unrelated. Were the acts related or were the acts unrelated, which is a little tricky, not super easy to understand. So again, we're continuing to try and make the rules easier, more clear to understand. And I do think this helps. So basically it's going to have to do with intervening events. So if there can be a single penalty applied for multiple breaches between intervening events. And then the reverse of that, obviously, multiple penalties applied for breaches before and after intervening events. So now the question is, what are the intervening events? So we got two intervening events, again, kind of keeping it very, very simple here. So intervening events would be the completion of a stroke or then being aware or becoming aware of a breach. So basically what that's meaning, obviously, so an example of that would be, let's see, causing your ball to move is not a good example, but say you take practice swings in a bunker, for example, right? And you did not know that that was a penalty. You take 5 or 6 practice swings in the bunker, and then you make a stroke. Okay, and then somebody says, hey, I don't think that was a penalty. Well, there was no, you're just going to get the one penalty, the 2-stroke penalty for hitting multiple practice swings in the bunker. That's where you're going to get those single penalty applied. Now, if you took practice swings in the bunker, your fellow competitor says, hey, I don't think you're allowed to do that, or kind of maybe you're not sure if you're allowed to do it, and then you go and take more practice swings, well, that includes an intervening event. So therefore, now you're going to get multiple breaches because you had that intervening event before and after, right? So you had those practice strokes before you became aware, and then you made more practice strokes. Another example of the completion of a stroke penalty might be you make a stroke at a wrong ball. So by hitting that wrong ball before the stroke was completed, there was a penalty associated with that. Player then thinks they need to correct that mistake or do something after that. And then they continue to go on and make additional rules errors because they completed that stroke. That completion of the stroke was the intervening event. So there's the penalty stroke for the wrong ball. And then say you did something shortly after that. Again, that would have caused an additional penalty. So again, kind of simplifying it with the intervening events, whether there was a completion of a stroke, did events occur before or after, and then obviously if you became aware or becoming aware of a breach. Obviously in the rules, there's many exceptions within the rules. So the exception here would be failure to replace a moved ball. Certainly no change there. Again, the rules of golf didn't want to penalize you additionally for trying to correct the mistake, obviously. So player fails to replace the moved ball, they're only going to get the general penalty. And then as always got to count those penalty strokes. So again, if it's dealing with taking relief from a penalty area, has to do with something taking unplayable ball relief, you're always going to get those penalty strokes. No change there, no matter what happened. Penalty strokes are penalty strokes. They are always applied. They are never discounted. So I know we had a lot there. Any quick questions on 1-3? I know that's kind of a big change and a lot to take in. All right, I guess we'll continue moving on. I don't know if everybody's muted. That might be the issue as well. All right, penalty application changes. We got a substitution penalty. Prior to 2023, if you improperly substituted a golf ball, it was a 2-stroke penalty. Again, I think the rules of golf and the administrators in golf said, hey, that's kind of harsh. Let's dial that back a little bit to a 1-stroke penalty. So obviously an example, as you can see on the screen there, is putting ball. So you get to the putting green, you put your favorite putting golf ball on the green. That would be an improper substitution. So you're just going to get a 1-stroke penalty for incorrectly substituting your favorite putting ball on the green. So again, for those of you that might recognize that gentleman, Charles Frost, this was from when he played in the PGA Championship a few years ago. He's actually used this picture in particular is used quite a bit throughout the USGA PGA Rules Workshop slideshow. So kudos to Charles for getting all that screen time at those seminars. All right, so we got the 1-ball rule. Here we go. Model local rule G4 is the 1-ball rule. So there's a slight change there to where it's a 1-stroke penalty for each hole that you're in breach. Basically, that was changed. Let me flip to my notes here. So yeah, 1-ball rule, model local G4, 1 penalty stroke for each hole in breach of the local rule. Again, that used to be a 2-stroke penalty. So now, again, you just dialing that back, again, making the game a little friendlier, a little easier. Obviously, for the most part, unless you're playing an elite professional tour, not going to have that 1-ball rule. Even at the LPGA tour, we do not play the 1-ball rule. Partially for our reason is obviously our players don't have maybe have the access to free golf balls or continuation of a lot of golf balls. So that's part of the reason for us not allowing it. But again, only really for elite amateur championships, but something to note if you do have it in play. Okay, moving on to some equipment changes. Again, we got 4 different items here. damage club during a round, external attachments, building a club, and greenery materials. And again, that's before we get into the equipment changes. Again, just another note, of these changes and of these major changes, some of them may sound familiar to you, and that's because once the 2019 rules came out, as we kind of learned and grew with those 2019 rules, the USGA came out with clarifications or model local rules to put into play that allowed some of those changes. Now, those changes, instead of being model local rules, are now the rule. Now they're in the rules of golf. And again, like I said, it's a 4-year cycle to actually make changes to the rules. So creating model local rules is a way the USGA can kind of come out with something more immediately. The golf community can then decide whether they want to implement that in the short term or not, and then become the new rule cycle. The USGA then decides if they want to make it the standard and the rule, or do they want to keep it a switch, a setting, if you will, to turn on and off. So again, some of these are going to sound very familiar to you from 2019 and beyond, but now they're part of the text of the rules of golf in the rules of golf, not so much a clarification or a model local rule. So club damage, again, certainly nothing super new here. Again, I think the USGA came out with a change shortly after 2019. Again, the rules are pretty precise and didn't allow a lot of flexibility within the rule. I think PGA Tour really stepped up and voiced their opinion on things, and really got this change made to have a little more leeway in when clubs can be replaced. So again, we've got, no changes. That obviously if you have damage of the club, you're gonna be able to continue with that damage. That club's now conforming for that round. So you can continue with that damage from broken club, except in cases of abuse by the player. And then obviously model local rule G9, again, which most of the tours use, certainly allow for replacement of the club only when it's broken or significantly damaged. Again, some minor scratches and dents and dings certainly aren't going to allow a player to replace the club at the tour level. But the standard rule, if there are some damage to the club, there's certainly going to be some times where you're going to allow to do that. In 2019, when it first came out in 2019, the rules said the player normally must not replace except in limited cases. I think the rules came out to be a little more generous. And then the model local rule G9 then allows that more limited case. So that's kind of the major change there. But again, for the most part, nothing all that new. It's just that the text has included information in there. External attachments. This kind of came out, I think it was Hideki Matsuyama, I believe, last year. I believe had some paint or something like that on his golf club. And in 2019, or under the 2019 rules, he was not allowed to make a stroke even if those external attachments were removed. So I guess it was paint or stickers. I forget exactly what it was, but I think it was Hideki Matsuyama had some kind of external attachments and may have been these stickers. But obviously, so the rule change there is now you're going to be allowed to remove those things and then make a stroke. So if you have any external attachments, you're going to be allowed to remove it. Now, obviously, things like lead tape and things like that are still permitted and still allowed, but any kind of to the face of the club head is really where the issue lies, right? So a non-permissible external attachment, such as a sticker on the club face, you're going to be able to remove those things before. Obviously, if you make a stroke with those items on your club, it's just a disqualification penalty. So again, not too common in the day-to-day game, I don't think. But again, obviously, as we go through golf and as golf's played a lot, there's a lot of things that come up and raise questions that kind of makes everybody scratch their head a little bit. And I think this was one for the USGA. Said, hey, if you're allowed to remove it, why not let them remove it and play on, as opposed to the language that was in there before. Building and carrying a club, real simple change here. I'm not sure the whole story behind it here, but obviously building a club, the key change in 2019 basically, obviously, you were not allowed to build a club from pieces you carried, but if somebody else were carrying pieces of a golf club on the golf course, you could build a club from those pieces in 2019. In 2023, not the case anymore. So it doesn't matter who's carrying those pieces of the club on the golf course. You cannot build a club from those pieces that are being carried on the golf course. Now, if you go back to the golf shop, go to your car, maybe there's a tour van or something like that there, you can go back to those places. If you're replacing the club, fixing a broken club, or maybe didn't have 14 clubs in your bag and you're adding a club, the rules of golf are going to allow you to go back to the clubhouse, grab it from the trunk, grab it from the tour van. Again, as long as you're not delaying play, you're going to grab those pieces there, but you cannot use pieces that are carried by anyone on the course. So again, slight change there. Green materials. So again, maybe not so much at the club level for green media materials, unless maybe your club has, hosted some events and you have access to the information, but maybe not so much at the club level. But again, at the professional level, the tour level, and I think even some section events that green materials are provided, or even yardage books are provided. Certainly some modifications there. Again, so the green media materials applies to only strokes made from the putting green. Basically, the monolocal rule G11, which provided limitations on the green media material, which is now part of the rule. So again, if you have that official guide to the rules, the big thick book, in that big thick book, there's clarification 4.3/1, which talks about green materials and what you're allowed. So what that does is it's going to restrict the size of that green material, of that yardage book in a sense. It's going to limit the scale of those green materials. So the rule now restricts that, the rule. And now model local rule G12 completely eliminates no written, printed, or electronic materials to be used to help read the line of play on the putting green. So again, there's those model local rules which toggle those things on and off. So example, like PGA Tour, a lot of the tours last year went to restricting the green reading materials. There used to be greens books, obviously. I don't know what the college level is doing, to be honest with you, but I know a lot of the professional tours, if not all the professional tours at this point, have eliminated the greens books. And now the only book that you're allowed to use is a book approved by the committee. And all those books will say book approved by the committee, and then the players are very restricted as to what information they can add to that book. It has to be information either from their own memory or knowledge. They're not allowed to go out there and measure any kind of condition and write that information in the book. They can measure it, but it has to be committed to memory, which makes it a very challenging task to do. Again, it's golf, and I think the idea behind the green media material information was it's a game of skill, and some of those green media material books were eliminating that skill. So the USGA and RNA are bringing back that skill. All right, scorecards. Moving on to scorecards, handicap requirement. Again, for those running club events, this certainly could impact you. Again, this is for stroke play events where the card is certified. So actually, we're talking about handicap first, I'm sorry. Players not responsible for showing the handicap on the scorecard. Before, the player had to show their handicap in a stroke play event, and now they're no longer required to do so. Now it's a committee responsibility. Again, there's a model local rule L2, which makes the player responsible for showing the handicap. Again, probably not likely to be used, model local rule L2. I think for the most part, the technology allows us as golf professionals to have quick access to handicaps and be able to pull that information in fairly quickly. Obviously, again, as a side note from running a lot of club events, I certainly recommend, if you don't already, is to put a date for your club event. Say you've got a member on the weekend, you might want to say, hey, we're going to use handicaps as of a certain date, and let's list that information on your application. Say it's a Saturday, Sunday event, you could say, hey, we're going to use handicaps as of the Wednesday before the event. Obviously, again, that's just going to allow the committee time to create flights, to create tee times, so on and so forth. So again, just throw in that little tidbit information out there as well. But now, again, it's the committee responsibility to have that information on the scorecard and make sure that that's correct. This one's kind of unique, marker certification. So again, if you've played in events, a group of 3 and a player drops out, when you have that situation, usually somebody had to, ideally, right, didn't always happen, but hopefully, the player that was marking that scorecard signed that scorecard. So essentially, when you went back to the scoring tent, you would theoretically have a scorecard with 3 signatures on it. This is saying it's not necessarily required. So there's no requirement for multiple markers to certify if one marker sees the player play all the holes. And again, obviously, if you're in a group of 3, a player withdraws, again, no need for 3 signatures on the card at the end of the round. We just need 2 people that saw the entire round, saw all the holes. So again, more housekeeping items more than anything else. But again, just makes it a little bit cleaner and easier. I can certainly say in my time running events, player withdrew, the exchange of scorecards was always a little goofy. People weren't sure what to do or didn't realize that they needed to sign the scorecard before leaving the golf course just to verify the scores that they did keep. So again, just makes it a little bit neater and easier, and it's actually written in the rules this way to make it clean and easy. But again, model local rule can certainly allow whether you put that information in there or not. So again, hard to see my screen and see you guys on the screen there. So hard to see if there are any questions, but I guess I'll pause and again, I don't know if everybody's muted or not, but certainly happy to take a question or two if there is one.
Okay, Brian, just a question, to these rules, do you have any recommendations for our staff and our members, keeping them informed on some of these?
Yeah, obviously, knowing the model local rules is always a good thing for us. So for those, at golf courses running member events, know the options that are available and understand there's quite a few. I think there's, I don't know, gosh, at least 30 model local rules that you can put in there. So certainly at the club level for those running member events, certainly recommend being familiar with the model local rules and what options are available and not. I think a lot of people might be surprised as to what model local rules are in there. Again, my other recommendation is certainly, you don't necessarily have to be an expert of the rules of golf, but you need to have a strong understanding of the rules and hopefully have a strong rule sheet to protect you, right? So my biggest thing is, the rules are there to help you and help the players and protect the players and protect you. So nothing worse, I'm sure, for those that have run member events, we've all been in that situation where a member comes to you and maybe you just don't have a good answer, right? They're coming to you with a ruling and maybe the rule sheet wasn't very clear, didn't have the details on there, and you get kind of put in an awkward position. So the more you can kind of, put on there and put the information in there is really good. So maybe it's a hard card, right, for your club, and you have, hey, these are the standard rules for all of our play or whatever it might be. But yeah, having a really solid local rule sheet will certainly help and clarify things. And with these model local rules, there's actual text in there, right? So the text will help you put that information in your rule sheet. So you don't necessarily have to say, by the way, model local rule B6 is in play, because nobody knows what B6 is. I don't know what B6 is. There may not even be a B6. But there's that text, right? So the rules of the USGA and RNA have done a great job putting that text in there. So you can, it might create a very long rule sheet, but it puts the words and puts the language in there for your members. So that would be my recommendation on that.
Thank you.
We have a section hard card, which reflects some of the monolocal rules that we implement for our tournaments. I think it'd be a great starting point for any of the members out there. If you guys look at that, you can find it on our website on our tournament page. But there's several monolocal rules that we implement for our tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, use each other, help each other out. Again, I'm happy to help with any of that I can. If you have any questions as to what model local rules maybe need to be in place or something like that, happy to help in any way I can in regards to those model local rules. All right, we'll get back to it here. I'm sorry, Ben.
Let me ask one question. When you're talking about the greens reading material, the image you have there with the arrows on it on the green, that would not be permissible anymore, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you're allowed to show a little bit of, again, yeah, you're allowed to show some information on the putting greens, but usually the restrictions now kind of limit what information is specifically allowed. So yeah, I mean, if you want to draw your own arrows, but for the most part, a book that is conforming to the rules of golf, I don't believe should have allowed that. I'd have to look closer at the the actual text and definition of it, but yeah, it's certainly restricted quite a bit as to what information, how much information can be on there. And again, depending on what level you are, what kind of you have.
Sure, there's a lot of clubs book with some of that information. It might be a good opportunity to take a look at any facilities yardage books out there and make sure those are conforming if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, again, I totally recommend that. Again, if you're a facility that's had a yardage book produced for your club and you're running club events, put that information out there. Again, you don't want to get caught in that situation where, during a club championship, a guy's out there, a woman's out there, and pulls out a yardage book from 2017 of the club, that an event at your club held, and all of a sudden that book not be conforming. Now you got to go to that member and give them some bad news. So certainly good to share that information with your members if there are some yardage books that are produced out there. That there must be some conforming information in there. So again, certainly encourage you to all the professionals to take a look at the rules, understand that. And if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to help, or anybody at the section office. Again, whether it's Ben, Mike, any of those guys, at the section office would certainly be happy to help clarify that information for you on those yardage books. But better to get ahead of it than to deal with it later, because it doesn't go well. Nobody feels good about dealing with it later. So get ahead of it if you can. So, all right. So we're already at 30 minutes.
I have one quick question. Is there like a template or a chart that these are the good model rules or model local rules to use for this event, that event, so on and so forth? So almost like a chart of here they all are. This would be good for a match play. This would be good stroke play. This would be good for member, guest, whatever.
Not necessarily in that regard, but there is an index to the model local rules. So you can kind of scan through the index of the model local rules to kind of get an idea of what model local rules are out there. Again, depends on the skill level of the players, depends on the golf course and weather conditions. So there's a lot of variables that can go into that. But again, I think, looking at the Carolinas PGA hard card and looking at those things, those are pretty standard model local rules that get put into place at a lot of events. Obviously, if they're in place at the section level for section tournaments, then maybe something to consider at your club. But no, great question. There's not an easy list like that, but there is an index to the model local rules, and certainly, again, looking at what other clubs in your area are doing may not be a bad idea as well to reference. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and keep moving on, and I'm happy to stay on as long as we need some.
Ryan, can I interrupt just
yes,
for a moment?
Jim Deaton.
A couple of things. One, I think it's advantageous that you have a standard local rule sheet for your facility. That number one, you post it on your website, and two, that you post it on your bulletin board. So those rules that would always be in effect for your facility, that would be at variance, ones that you add for those special conditions as your golf course changes and evolves. Also, I know you would be open, as would Ben and myself, if there was anyone that had a question about the application of the model rule for their facility, that they could either email or call you or Ben or someone else who is recognized as someone that has a extended experience with officiating to keep them out of trouble.
Yes, absolutely. Certainly highly recommend that. And so, again, I'm not seeing it on the screen, Jim Deaton there. Also, longtime PGA Rules Committee member. Any of us happy to help in any way we can with that. So good point.
It's kind of good to have your phone number on call if they're in a situation at their club that they need an answer really quick.
Yeah, I've gotten many calls. I'm on a few people's short list for sure. All right, we'll keep moving on. We got a lot to cover here still. So, and I know we're getting close to the 45-minute mark. We're 11 minutes away and still a lot of material to cover here. So again, we'll fly through. These are playing the ball, so some of these we might move through a little bit more quickly than others. The referee worsens the conditions. Basically, the rules before that were a little unclear as to what the player could do to clean up an issue that a referee, again, maybe a referee was in a bunker or, something along those lines. Now the rules are a little bit more clear on that, and you're going to allowed to be fix those conditions affecting the stroke. Ball at rest moved by natural forces. This is a good one. I'll take a little time on this one. This is probably the most famously known as maybe the Ricky Fowler, or I think Charlie Hoffman was very vocal about this at one point. But again, Ricky Fowler in 2022, I believe, maybe 21. Again, but steep slope next to the penalty area. Ricky got his ball back into play. He's assessing the shot and what he wants to do. The ball rolls back into the penalty area. Prior to 23, that required an additional penalty stroke, an additional drop, again, with the likelihood that it could happen again. So again, I think another solid change here. Let's not, keep compounding the issues. You've taken your medicine, you've taken your drop. And I've had this with a few players, and it's just tough to deal with. You got to tell them they get another penalty stroke. They get frustrated. So now we don't have to worry about that. So again, the ball must be replaced. And again, I emphasize the word must be replaced if after being dropped, placed, or replaced, and it comes to rest in a different area of the golf course or out of bounds. So those are benefit situations. Again, maybe on the reverse side of that, again, maybe your ball's on the fringe of the putting green, so it's not on the putting green. Natural forces move that ball to the putting green after it's been dropped, placed, or replaced. Now we got to put that ball back. Same kind of situation there. You got to put that ball back to the fringe, since the putting green is a different area of the golf course. Cleaning the ball. Again, the rules were just a little unclear with this one, whether you could clean your ball. That was not lifted again. So one stroke penalty for cleaning the ball, that is not lifted. So again, just kind of tightening up some of the language and making it a little more clear here. Back on the line relief. Again, I think this is important. Again, when 2019 rules came out, there was different drop-in procedures. The back on the line relief procedure was a little different. It was basically saying that if it was encouraged for the player to pick a reference point and put a tee down on the ground to create that reference point. That way you knew if it was a redrop situation. Again, as we kind of got through 2019 a little bit, we realized that there might be some situations where it might be trapping a player if they did not put a tee down or put a mark down to indicate that nearest or that reference point. So now we're kind of going back to some degree what it was, but back on the line relief, the ball must be, dropped on the reference line. So you're going to determine how far back you want to go. As long as you're back on that line, you guys drop it on that line. So again, we'll have another graphic here. Again, so in the infographic, the ball crosses at point X. You can use the black dotted line as your reference line. You have a 1 club length area to drop in from there. So the ball could go closer to the hole, but can only go closer up to 1 club length. But you have 1 club length circle to drop it in. So again, there was a model local rule that allowed this. And again, most tours, most organizations included this, again, to help not trap a player in a sense into getting a penalty or playing from the wrong place or something like that. So again, just kind of taking what we learned shortly after 2019 and implementing as the rule. All right, so we're talking about playing the ball here. Again, all the questions about ball played from putting green and being deflected, what counts as a replay and what counts as played as it lies. So in this case, it's, again, the rules are kind of clarifying it a little bit more. And again, if there was a model local rule, the rule in 2019 was very strict. Eventually, the USGA created a model local rule that lessened the limitations on it a little bit. So you're going to replay your stroke if your ball hits a person, a move obstruction, or an animal is when you're going to replay. And this is kind of a brief breakdown of this rule here, right? So left-hand side of the situation replayed as it lies. the right-hand side's a replay situation. So if it hits the player or person attending the flag stick, it's a replay. If it's any other person, it'd be a replay. Plays at lies if it hits the club used, the ball at rest, the ball mark at the flag stick. Play doesn't lie if it hits a loose impediment insect. Those items that are considered insects under loose impediments. So those are the situations, again, that require the replay. So again, taking that information that was already in place and putting it in the rules. Embedded ball relief, this changed a little bit as well. Again, I think in 2019, basically, very rare that it could happen, but you could have an embedded ball situation. Your relief, or your reference point for your relief is directly behind the golf ball. And then you have a one club length relief area. But if your ball was maybe embedded in the edge of a bunker, the lip of a bunker, where it's not in the bunker, your spot is directly behind it, and your one club length, and you get kind of stuck. So now the USGA RNA have put this rule into place where you're going to be able to go to the general area. It must be in the general area. So you're going to find that that spot right behind where the ball is embedded, and that spot right behind it has to be in the general area. Real quick, time to identify. Again, so there was a lack of understanding or clarity on how much time a player had to identify a golf ball. I think it used to be within that 3 minutes. So now we're going to actually give the player a minute to identify it. So say you look for that golf ball for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Somebody says, "Hey, I think I found it." You have a full minute from that spot to go identify that golf ball. So even though your 3 minute search time's over, this time to identify kind of extends that, or gives you some additional bonus time to try to identify that golf ball. So again, more just kind of clarifying the language in the rules and making sure it's a little more clear. Again, more information, 18.2a 1/3, meaning the definition of meeting a reasonable time to do so. So again, more internal definitions within the rules. Helping with line of play. Again, the restriction here used to be more on anywhere except the putting green. Now it's, we'll go back there. Sorry, I'm getting my notes here. 2019, it was setting down the object to help with taking the stance. In 2023 now, regardless of the area of the golf course, a player is not allowed to set an object down to show the line of play or to help take the stance. So again, setting an object down, cannot do it. Again, sitting down, aiming objects, no change there. That was always the case. Again, similar instances, put any kind of marking down. So actually putting anything down to indicate the line of play is not permitted. So again, 2019 was other than the putting green, the player would be allowed to set an object down. Now 23 just restricts that even to the putting green. The caddy sitting in the restricted area. Again, this is not anything super new. Again, as it says, modifications to the 2019 rules. They made several clarifications that are now incorporated into the redrafted rule of 10.2b4. And they've added this term restricted area. So that caddy is not allowed to stand in that restricted area. So I think most of us should be fairly familiar with that. But now it's incorporated in the rule, and they've added this term restricted area, gave it a name, that you're not allowed to stand in that restricted area. Now some flexibility with that would be, obviously you're not allowed to stand in that restricted area if you're there to help with aiming. However, if you're there to help, if somebody happened to be there to help with something other than aiming, they would be permitted to be in that restricted area. An example of that might be, players under a tree, they're in there taking their stance, and they're making some practice swings to see if they're going to hit the tree or clip that. If the caddy happened to be standing in the restricted area at that time, that's going to be allowed because he's not there to help aim. He's simply there for other help, which would be maybe to help make sure he's got clearance from a tree. So that might be an example of that other than aiming help. But obviously, if they're there to help with aiming, again, not allowed. Self-standing putter. Won't touch on this too much just because there's going to be more information coming out later. But obviously the self-standing putter, there's going to be some delayed implementation of a clarification into 2025. Self-standing putters are still approved and permitted. It's just how you use those self-standing putters that's going to be modified in 2025. So again, can be continued to use by setting it down right next to the ball to help aim or take stance position, but obviously not allowed to be set down directly behind the golf ball. All right, we'll move through this pretty quickly. So in Rule 21, there's just some reporting requirements. Again, some modifications in 22 and 23. Not sure how many of you actually noticed, but in 2019, there used to be 24 rules, and now we have 25 rules. So Rule 25 is the modifications for players with disabilities. So all those modifications with disabilities used to be within each rule, and there were some notes to it, and then there was an external document as well. And now the USGA RNA have created Rule 25 for all those modifications. Again, obviously, trying to grow and enhance the game. Pinehurst number 6 was host for the first USGA Disabilities Championship. They're hosting it again this year. So kind of a neat thing to be hosted here in the Carolinas, to be the inaugural section or state here in North Carolina to host that Players with Disability, the Disabilities Championship. And now those items are in the rules in Rule 25 there to look at. So again, kind of real brief, real quick, what we have there. Kind of ran through some things very quickly, but I know everybody's time is precious, and I don't want to take up any more time than needed for some folks. I'm happy to stay on and take a few questions. I know we're scheduled for 45 minutes, so I think for those that maybe still have about 10 minutes to eat lunch before they have to get back somewhere, feel free. Again, I think Ben's sharing the Google information to put in your, put in your PGA information. Make sure you guys get your proper credits for it. But again, if you guys need to start taking off, I certainly understand. I certainly appreciate your time and thank you for your time. But I'm also happy to stay on for a little bit longer to help answer any questions that there may be as well. So again, thanks to Rob, thanks to Ben for those that are leaving. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Happy to help in any way that I can. Feel free to reach out to me. Obviously, you've got great help at the section office as well. And there's several others within the state that are happy to help with you with any rules questions, with local rules, whatever it may be. Obviously, we want to make sure help each other look good, help each other look professional, and be successful. So happy to help in any way. So again, for those taking off, appreciate it. And again, I'll stay on for a few questions.
Yeah, I have a question for Ben. Ben, do you send that link to the emails, or I have to try to cut and paste that what you keep flashing up on there?
You should be able to just right click it and open it in another tab, or I can email it to you. I'm sorry, just let me know who's speaking.
This is Mike Stewart.
I'll send it to you.
All right, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I do have a question with the ruling, and I'm bad. Maybe I'm bad. I try to stay up with it. I thought you're allowed to ground your club now in the bunker. You had mentioned that earlier in the meeting. Are you talking about numerous times?
Yeah, so the reference I was making earlier was you're not allowed to, certainly not allowed to ground your club in the bunker. My reference earlier was taking practice swings in the bunker, which you're still not allowed to do, and whether multiple penalties would apply and how those would apply. If you had made multiple practice swings in the bunker and then made your stroke, well, there's going to be penalties before the stroke, and then depending on what you did afterwards, there could have been penalties. Or the best example of that would have been taking multiple practice swings. Somebody says, hey, you're not allowed to do that, and you continue to make practice swings. Now you're going to get penalties on both sides. The intervening event of becoming aware, somebody letting you know that that was not correct, that's the intervening event. So you're going to get penalty strokes on both sides of that intervening event for the infraction of those practice strokes in the bunker. But no, not allowed to ground your club in the bunker.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian?
Yes.
What was the logic behind allowing, this is Alan Chandler, Highlands Falls. What was the logic behind allowing the ball to roll forward when dropping on that reference point?
Again, you're on a reference point, so you get to choose you can go back as far as you want, right? So it's you could have been a yard closer. You could have been a yard behind. You had somewhere, and you had to be anywhere on that line essentially. So I think the idea with the way it was in 2019 when it first came out, again, the rules of golf were really requesting that we put a reference point down. If the ball went forward of that reference point, you're now in a wrong place. And again, prior to 2019, the way the rules allowed, there was some leeway within that anyway. So now they just kind of gone back to where it was originally. Again, you're back on the line. You could have been a yard closer. You could have been a yard further back. They're just allowing some room and some room in there to say, yeah, it could have gone forward, and that's fine. You can play it from there.
And
Right.
you can drop it. You can drop it anywhere within the one club reference point.
Correct. As long as you keep that spot between you and the hole, and you're dropping on that reference line. Now it's more of a reference line, and the ball happens to roll forward. It can roll forward up to a club length, and you can play it from that reference. That's your relief area.
So men and women's are all.
Yep.
Brian, could I add just a little bit to that?
Certainly. Please do.
When the rule change was made originally, if you were dropping back on that line and the ball went forward of the reference point, then you played it from there, you would have been playing from the wrong place. Well, the PGA Tour officials were worried
All Americans, as I mentioned, got done at the series.
to dropping a ball back on the line that was farther from the hole where the ball last crossed the margin of the penalty area, and then some players would go ahead and play it because they were allowed to do that in the past. So they came up with that model, model local rule to avoid that possibility, which it ended up then actually the player, what David Stabler would call in his workshops, he had a choosy. So if the ball went forward, you had the option of either playing it or you could pick it up and redrop it to keep it in that relief zone that basically would be a semicircle. So now that change has been made for this update that now the ball can go forward on that instance only when you're dropping it back on a line away from the flagstick, but cannot roll more than one club length. So that relief zone becomes a full circle instead of just a semicircle. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Yep.
Hey Ben, this is Larry Panther. I'm on telephonically, so can you send me that link via email as well?
I definitely can.
All right, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess if there's no other questions, I know there's some basketball to watch, maybe a cold beverage on the St. Patrick's Day to be consumed. But again, thank you everybody for their time. Again, thanks to Rob and Ben and everybody for allowing me the time to do this and share this information. Again, happy to help in any way I can. Again, a lot of support in the section to make sure we get the rules correct, make sure we get it right, make sure we all look good and look professional in front of our members, in front of our events, and when we're playing in the tournaments as well, to make sure that we're acting correctly so that we don't lose potential income from playing in some events. So nobody likes to lose income. So again, happy to help in any way we can. Again, thanks so much, guys. And hopefully we'll see you around. Thank you.